Tonight, President Trump says the United States will blockade the Strait of Hormuz, stepping up pressure on Iran after peace talks in Pakistan ended without a breakthrough. The waterway is a critical trade route and the shipment of 1/5 of the world's oil supply. And this weekend, U.S. warships crossed the strait for the first time since the war began to begin clearing Iranian mines. Tonight, a new CBS poll shows President Trump taking a hit. 64% of Americans now disapprove of his handling of the situation in Iran, and even more, 66% say the Trump administration has not clearly explained U.S. goals. And we begin tonight with CBS's Imtiaz Tyab in Islamabad. Imtiaz, good evening to you.
Tom, good evening. Well, the region is really on edge tonight as the U.S.-Iran peace talks break down without a deal, threatening a fragile ceasefire, the global economy, and a very real risk of returning to all-out war.
As Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Islamabad, there was a real sense of optimism here. Special envoys Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner also joined. They arrived just hours after the Iranian delegation, led by the Speaker of Parliament Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The Pakistani hosts, who helped broker the fragile 2-week ceasefire so these talks could happen, had gathered the world's media at a convention center close to the luxury hotel where the negotiations were held, to cover what would become the highest-level face-to-face meetings between top American and Iranian political leaders since the 1979 revolution. And after 21 hours of marathon talks, Vice President Vance emerged at 6 a.m. local time and said this.
We've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
A U.S. official close to the talks told CBS News the United States and Iran did not reach an agreement on all of the following points: ending uranium enrichment, dismantling enrichment facilities, retrieving uranium stockpiles, accepting a broader regional peace, ending funding for proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, and perhaps most urgently, fully reopening the Strait of Hormuz and charging no tolls for passage. Major issues which throw into question whether the shaky ceasefire would hold until the April 22nd deadline, if further talks would be held, and whether U.S. forces would return to direct combat. Mushahid Hussain Syed is a member of the Pakistani Senate.
Are we at the precipice of a deal or something far worse?
I feel we are at the precipice of a deal. But the very fact that the notion that 48 hours before the talks commenced, there was talk of wiping out civilizations. So that shows that both sides have an intent or a desire and the willingness to give peace a chance.
And tonight, Pakistani leaders said it was, quote, imperative the U.S. and Iran uphold the ceasefire agreement and that it would also try to host further talks in the coming days, Tom. And as 2 U.S. warships passed through the Strait of Hormuz for the first time since the war began as part of attempts to clear it of mines.
All right, Imtiaz Tyab with the updates out of the Middle East. Imtiaz, thank you. And tonight, U.S. stock and oil futures are set to open amid new uncertainties in the Middle East. And then there is this. Iran's top negotiator and Speaker of Parliament took to social media warning Americans that, quote, soon you'll be nostalgic for $4 to $5 gas. President Trump right now headed back to Washington after spending the weekend in Florida. And CBS's Taurean Small is in Doral. So, Taurean, good evening to you. With peace talks off, what happens next?
Good evening, Tom. The president today saying that blockade will stop Iran from selling oil, but also acknowledged high energy prices could continue.
Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win.
President Trump downplayed the significance of the talks with Iran as he made his way down to Miami yesterday, just hours before negotiations collapsed. As the situation in the Strait of Hormuz has sent global energy costs skyrocketing. AAA reports the price of a gallon of regular spiked 40% since the day before the war began. The president said in an interview Sunday that prices could remain high through November.
So do you believe the price of oil and gas will be lower before the midterm elections?
I hope so. I mean, I think so. It could be, or the same, or maybe a little bit higher, but it should be around the same.
Higher oil costs are fueling a surge in inflation, according to a March report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. New CBS polling shows the president's approval rating on his handling of inflation is down to 31%. The poll also found most Americans think gas prices have been a financial hardship since the start of the war.
So I'll drive the extra 10, 15 minutes just to pay 40 cents less per gallon.
Democrats blame the administration.
Gas in Virginia was $2.81 40 days ago. It is over $4 now. Even if President declares victory tomorrow, those high gas prices will be with us for months.
While Republicans caution Iran is still a threat.
No one is willing to trade lower gas prices for Iran becoming a nuclear state.
Lawmakers return to Washington tomorrow. They're expecting a supplemental request to fund this war on top of a $1.5 trillion defense spending budget request for next year. Tom?
All right, Taurean Small traveling with the president for us. Taurean, thank you.